Okay, welcome everybody to our first Indzaba of 2021 and my first in Waterford Kamhlaba. I wasn't quite expecting to start online, but there we have it. It's better than not being able to start at all. This is our first community online meeting, and I'd like to thank all of you for having participated by sending your questions to us in advance. And for the warm welcome that I personally have had to the school. I think this is my day 4, and I've certainly hit the ground running. And it's really great that I was able to get that window to be able to come into the country just before the borders have closed now. So I'm extraordinarily lucky, and I look forward to working with you and laughing with you and being with you all very soon. Over the last 10 months, I know that there has been a huge amount of uncertainty and loss and anxiety about the future. And this is not only here in Eswatini, but all over the world. And I think COVID moving around the world and in places has made people very vulnerable to a sense of when is this all going to end? You know, we have talk of vaccines being developed and rolled out in different countries, and how are they going to be accessible to us all? Our travel plans over the last few weeks have been thwarted by not having able to get visas, entry permits, and student permits. So those have all created this feeling of anxiety and loss. And ultimately, when we're able to open face-to-face, we'll all wonder, you know, how did we manage over the last few months? As of yesterday, all schools are closed in Eswatini, even for online learning. And that will be reconsidered in the coming days. And we will know on the 22nd of January whether that will be possible. So we don't actually open our academic program until the 27th. So we do have a window open to us to be able to start. In the meantime, I know that a lot of you personally have had loss. And I'd like to extend my very sincere condolences to each one of you who have been in this situation. But there's also loss of family connections, loss of being able to meet friends and be with them. And also a loss of opportunities that you all have felt over the last few months. There's anxiety around the health, our own health, the health of those that we love and those around us. But we've also managed over the last year to gain a huge amount of knowledge about how we connect. And what I personally have learned, because I'm not one of the young people here at our school, is how connected our students are. They're connected to each other, but they're also connected to other students at the other UWCs and around the world. So they already have all the tools in order for them to come back to school, learning whether it be face-to-face or online. And despite all the difficulties that students have had in terms of access to learning online, they have received the support that most of them have needed. And if they haven't, it's our pledge to be able to do so as we open our school virtually or our doors to you all. One student told me yesterday, she said, "You don't really know what's important until it's gone." And I think it really hit home on me, because sometimes you think of the big things that are important, but actually it's some of the very small things that we have taken for granted all our lives until now. And then we're not able to grasp them in our hands. So let's think about what we're learning, about what's really important, and focus on that. Waterford has not gone. We're still here, and we are going to open our doors. It might not be quite in the same way that we did before, and we have to create for that our purpose together. And that's what we'll be working on in the months ahead. The UWC education experience remains utmost in our minds, and it's certainly in the minds of students and their parents. And so even with the financial constraints at home, we will make it possible to have a different kind of experience as we move into a phased learning here at Waterford Kamhlaba. It's a unique experience, and it is possible online. It's a different experience, but it is possible. And we will deepen our connections with the other 17 UWCs and beyond. During the last 10 months and in the last few days, I've had letters from parents, from the student council, the student group, showing real compassion and a true empathy for those who we know, but also those who we don't know. And we're here now on the 14th of January in a very, very critical situation in the Kingdom of Eswatini. And perhaps if we could have a look at some of the slides that the communications department has prepared. These slides were taken from information a couple of days ago, just to let you into what is the situation here in Eswatini with regard to COVID, which some of you have been interested in finding out. I don't know if we have those slides available. Whilst we're managing to get that up and running, what has happened is that the demographics of those who are contracting COVID are quite clearly within the 25 to 45 age range, quite alarmingly so. And even more alarming is the death rate within Eswatini. And for a small country, that is very, very significant. And so we have doubled and redoubled our efforts to make this campus as safe as possible. The closing of the borders a couple of days ago has made it even more difficult for supplies to get into Eswatini. And the only way that non-essential services can happen is by air. So if students are coming into the country, the only way that they will be able to come into the country is by air and with a student permit. Unfortunately, the government is not issuing any new permits, nor is it processing at the moment the permits that were, here we have them, were in process. So we're quite at a difficult situation. So here we have an overview as of the 12th of January, 2 days ago. And what I'd like to draw your attention to is the new cases. Yeah, so we have 2 days ago, 208 new cases and 21 deaths. The next slide, please. And here I was talking a little bit about the demographics. So from 0 to 19, as you can see, this represents 10% of the population, which is quite a significant difference than it was a few months ago. Can we have the next slide? And you can find these slides, the information on the Eswatini Ministry of Health page. And here you see quite a significant spike in the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19. So the second wave is very, very different to the first wave of cases that we had in the winter. And again, although there are significant recoveries, the new cases are cumulatively increasing over the last few days. Can we go to the next slide? And here we have a total. Can we go to the next slide? Before Mr. Donovan King talks, I would just like you to understand a little bit about the preparations that we have made, and you've seen some of them, but they've been quite significant within the school. If we go through from taking your temperature at the gate, everybody is screened. Every single person who comes onto our campus is screened every day. So the sanitizing at the gate and the sanitizing all around the school. So both water, soap and water, but also alcohol sanitizing, both within the classrooms, within all offices, and outside of the offices and in spaces around about the school. We've increased the number of possibilities for eating outside as well as inside, so that we can have spacing for everybody who will be both meeting, eating, and working outside. And just to give you an example, we as an administrative team work outside most of the time. So this is just a little clip of going into the cafeteria, to the dining hall with water and soap. And actually, you know, I spoke to our chair, Dr. Mills, the other day, and he was saying we need to be washing our hands at least 50 times a day. So that's quite a lot. So hopefully you can begin to start doing that at home, even though it might not be as necessary. We have one-way systems within the school, so directionality signs all over the school. As you can see at the bottom of the staircase, an arrow, and both on the stairwells going up and down, as you can see in the next slide. And this is to reduce contact between human contact as we move around the school. Outside the classrooms, there'll be soap and water, but also inside the classrooms, there'll be sanitizers, and students will be sanitizing their workspaces as well, as we have to do. And that includes things like pencils, pens, and all of that sort of thing. We'll go back to the questions and answers in a few minutes, but I'd like to introduce you to Donovan King, who is the Deputy Principal for the Pastoral Care, who has taken the questions that you have submitted to us, and he will answer or attempt to answer some of them, as we will all attempt to. Things are changing daily, and we will try and update you as we can as the information changes. Mr. King?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Angoy. And good afternoon, or whatever time it might be. Good greetings to everyone. It is good to be back and doing something about getting us started. I do know that there is major disappointment about the fact that we have to announce that we're going online. And the questions that came through had a lot to do with mental health support. And if I can ask Mangoba again to share my presentation, then I'll take you through what is already in place and how we hope to strengthen that. Because it's quite possible a number of students, especially new students and parents, are not aware of what's in place in terms of support for students. So when we started right at the beginning, we had to switch our entire focus from obviously the face-to-face to an online system. Thank you, Mangoba. And we had to shift to online platforms so that students could access support. And that whole setup was through our online school page. And that's important that we use that page. And at the beginning, students were using the page, and later on, we found that they weren't. So one of the first platforms that the pastoral team had set up was the Google site, and you can access that from the online school page. The Instagram page, which many students were using, and the last one was the Google Classrooms in each phase, which means that every student was entered into a classroom, and there was information put into those classrooms appropriate to the different phases, and students could interact, ask questions, so provide information, and so forth, and the counselors interacted with them in those spaces. So that was on a whole school level. Then there were some small group counselings that we had, and the very first ones were called healing spaces, because we soon realized that students were battling with online learning. And one of the first things that came about was, if you move on, please, Manloba, the first healing space was around the George Floyd incident. Students, rightly so, wanted some reaction from school, and our counselors responded by trying to provide space, safe spaces where students could gather and talk about these incidents and move forward. So around the George Floyd incident, around the Black Lives Matter movement, and then also there was awareness that we needed to talk about coping with the pandemic and learning during this time. So we had small group sessions in those. If you could go back a bit, Manloba. Thank you. So there is another set of small groups called the Trails to Wellness. And this will continue because those are looking at how students can have coping skills during the pandemic, not just the learning and studying during this time, but coping skills in general, the fact that we are in lockdown, we're not interacting and so forth. And those were very successful. Unfortunately, not all students were accessing these platforms. So with the individual counseling, that had to continue. And many of the students who were seeing the counselors on an individual basis had got into contact with them. The platforms obviously then had to change. Counselors use WhatsApp, Google Meet, and Zoom. And the way to access that was the normal way in terms of it. Students either directly approached the counselors, parents could approach counselors. And one of our very big improvements, I think, was that the tutor and teacher interaction within those classrooms and within tutor group, we had many more referrals from teachers, subject teachers, and from tutors for counseling. And in that last one, we found that when we were meeting, the feedback from tutors and feedback from teachers brought students of concern that the counselors then went to approach. So in different areas, it might have been academic, it might be just not doing well, it might have been out of touch, it might have been not having the right resources. We then reached out individually to students. Normally we would have the students approaching us and parents approaching us and so forth, but we reached out so that we could provide that individual counseling support. Thank you, Manloba. A big part of this was to try and look after the teachers so teachers could provide the support also. And as I said, there was quite a lot of teachers and tutors who knew much more about what's happening with students. And so the counselors helped, the pastoral care team helped by arranging for looking after the teachers and the tutors. We had mindfulness on the Mondays, and even that we need to improve. As I said, teachers, that facility was there for teachers. And then workshops around education in the time of COVID-19. And we looked at things like teachers need to look after themselves and what they can do for self-care, global trends in terms of what's happening within education during this time. And very importantly, noticing the red flags within your students and referring students for more care. And those workshops, as I said, showed very well in terms of more involvement from teachers and referrals from tutors, and them knowing and getting to call home and actually be involved with tutors. Thank you, Manloba. So going forward, obviously, all of those are in place. And I thank the counselors in a big way for all the work that they have done. One of our areas that does need to be strengthened was what we had in place before, whole year group pastoral days. And we found it quite difficult to do those online. So that still needs some strengthening. I think what is difficult to handle are the issues that might trigger students who are battling and not being able to provide that support in that platform. But there's definite scope for us to do things that just are lighter and relieve students during that time and pick up the whole year group pastoral days again. So we can strengthen that. And I think maybe for me to end is to appeal to students, to parents, to teachers and tutors to make sure that they are using what is already there, bring forward their concerns, but also to make suggestions in terms of how else we can support you, the students, you, the parents, and you, the teachers and tutors. That's very important in terms of that. One of the good things that came out of last year, because it was tough, was the students who actually were creative and were helpful in organizing events for their own year groups. So the Form 4 year group was quite good with that, and they did some games online and things like that. And then we're thankful for the IB1s who also got together to try and bring their year group together. It's important that you know what support is available, and it's important that you let us know how we can support you. I think that's very important. If you notice it, I can talk about myself. The things that lifted me were our school events, the assemblies when I saw our students doing things, but also those live events and that were organized by students that brought us together in a way that made us feel good. I think that's very important for all of us. Your ideas need to come forward because even that will improve our mental health. So going forward, yes, we are disappointed about being online, but we do need to work together, and we need to be able to say, I need help, or I can provide help. It will make a big difference in terms of that. So there were a lot of questions about support. We are very aware that you need support, and we need that support too. Let us work together in terms of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Donovan King. I think it was one of the big trends that came through all the questions at some stage or other, because not only the students but parents are feeling the loss of an expectation that there was to come back, and that may still happen, quite soon. But it's being able to talk about that and being clear about what we can offer and what you can offer. Mr.
Sure.
King?
Can I just say one thing? One of the other good things that did happen was the parent involvement in trying to help parents deal with this pandemic. And last year they ran one workshop, but there is scope for parents to be involved. And if you contact the PSA to say that you have some skills in terms of that, they will be so grateful for that, and they have the means to be able to get us together, especially as parents, to see how we can support our students. I think that's also very important.
Thank you. Manola, can we have Mrs. de Koning's slides, please? She's unable to join us at the moment, but has sent in her contribution following the questions that you all have put about what will it be like for students and parents in the academic program. Of course, your children and you, your safety is first. And so we're all wearing masks, we're all socially distancing, we're all sanitizing our hands. And we're fortunate in the weather at the moment to have very well ventilated areas. And even when it gets cold, we will continue to have ventilated areas. So please stock up on your jumpers and your scarves for the winter ahead, because even when the situation improves, and it will improve, we will still have to maintain some of the safety precautions that we have now. And I can't see that that will be changing very quickly during the year. What Mrs. de Koning has done and worked with the whole academic staff is to relook at the timetable and see how can this really benefit the students moving forward into this new academic year. So we have a timetable of a 10-day schedule running over 2 weeks with longer periods, because it will take a bit longer as students transition from one area to the other, although the younger students will not be transitioning. And also to be able to sanitize coming in and out and the workspaces that they're in. This is particularly important in the sciences and in art, where you are probably going to be using more materials that have to be used by only one person at a time. So we have a longer period. The academic day is shorter for some, but it also enables us to have a look at what is the situation of individual students, whether they need to be in programs that actually extend them more, because for some students, they have been able to really develop academically over the last year. And for others, this means that we will have the time between 2:30 onwards on most days to be able to support students who have some areas of deficit over the last year. Can we have the next slide? There will be online academic orientation meetings for all new students. And for some of you in your questions, you were talking about those students who were only able to be here for a few weeks, very new to UWC here at Waterford, and how can we support them? So although they're not new students to the year, they are really effectively new students again. And so we will be in touch with them through the FACE coordinators with next week with more details of how that orientation the academic orientation will look. And especially for those who may be coming from a different pedagogical approach or a different kind of curriculum that they have experienced before. We will start with a new timetable, and students will be introduced during that orientation to the Google Classrooms and the subjects that they will be taking during the next year ahead. Thank you. For the teachers, online learning, teaching and learning, they are very familiar with what that has meant over the year, and well equipped, because as Mr. King said, you know, at the same time we have all been learning. I don't think I have attended more seminars and have been able to do so over the last year than I've done in the last 10 years before that. So we also have been learning too. And I think over the last year, teachers here will be able to manage online teaching and learning much more effectively than perhaps they thought they could at the beginning of March last year. And every effort, as Mr. King has said, will be made that students get what they need. Some of you were talking about textbooks. Some of those textbooks are available online, and we will make sure that you get what you need. And this is a collaborative process. So when you, as parents or students, if you feel you're missing something that's not quite clear to you, do make that known to your teachers, do make it known to your tutors. And we are in this collaborative process together. At the moment, the Ministry of Education is not even allowing online teaching and learning. Even where that has begun in some areas, they will no longer be able to carry that out until the 22nd, when that will be reassessed. So we will continue with our online teaching and learning as long as we are unable to offer another alternative. But at the same time, I want you to be very clear that we are making every single effort on a daily basis to be able to with other schools open on a face-to-face basis. So even if not all the schools will be able to open face-to-face, we hope that we can have a phased entry into Waterford Kamhlaba. So we'll be starting with a face-to-face model and then moving on to, as soon as we can, an online learning, and as soon as we can, face-to-face. And students, as Mr. King said, will be supported through Google Classrooms. The teachers, the majority of the teachers are not here at the moment, but we will at the same time look to purchasing online textbooks wherever possible, because even when we come face to face, there will be moments when students will be at home. Students may not be able to come into Eswatini in the way that those who are in our bordering countries or within the country. So we will look at the possibility of online textbooks, and more details on that will be forthcoming. Some of the questions were about the different time zones that you're all in, 8 hours, 12-hour differences in time zones. So materials will be uploaded and students will be able to arrange the contact times. And that's going to be more possible this year than it may have been possible last year, because we have rescheduled all the classes and have a different 10-day schedule with a different kind of length of time for each class. So there will be time in the 2:30 onwards for us to be able to have online one-on-one or small group tutor groups together, so that we can arrange for students to be in contact with their teachers and their tutors who happen to be in other time zones. And again, as I said before, the word catch up perhaps is not one that I favor, but you know, there are gains that students have had over the last 12 months. For all of us, there have been gains, every single one of us. But there may be gaps, and those are gaps that do exist. We will be able to attend to those on an individual and small group basis. One thing that students themselves have said is just how resilient they have become, and how motivated they have become, and how self-reliant they have become, how reflective. I have never received letters as self-reflective as I have in the last few days. And technologically speaking, I think our students are very adept where they have access to the technology and have access to internet services. And not everybody does in the same way. And we will be prioritizing those students who perhaps don't have that access. Continue with your questions, please. There is a Q&A, and I see that there are about 15 or 16 questions as we've been speaking over the last few minutes. And we will update our Q&A online to reflect the present situation in the country, and also to keep reviewing that. It's a very, very, it's a situation that's moving rapidly, much more so than I think we had expected 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we will have to adapt to that changing situation. Thank you, Manoma. And that's the challenge that we have. That's the challenge we all have, to be able to adapt very quickly and to have the our school ready to receive students when they arrive. We will be looking at, we can take this slide down, we will be looking at the possibility of accepting the residents of Eswatini, students who are coming from outside, from very vulnerable situations, to be on campus in the next few weeks. I'd just like to show you, and I think we're going to be putting together something very much more detailed of the work that has been done by Mr. Steve Maguire and his team. They've worked at night, they've worked at the weekends to get this campus ready to receive both our staff and our students when that happens. And also Sister Nomvula liaising with the Ministry of Health and the health services so that we can clearly identify students who may need medical help, staff who need medical help, and where they can go very quickly to have that. We have received donations. We have 600 thermometers at the moment for students to have their own thermometers. Students will be screened every day. Everyone coming onto campus will be screened every day. And we have protocols in place for those who test positive with COVID-19. It is impossible that we will not have COVID-19 positive cases on our campus, and we will be ready to deal with that through quarantine and isolation. So we have set aside areas in the school for both quarantine and for isolation when that happens. Ms. Carla Cabrita will be working very closely with the academic staff and the students to provide that support. And I'd like to have a little shout out for Ms. Elizabeth Kamajin, who has been working one-on-one with the students who have finished Waterford in an online basis in a way that I didn't think they would, I probably never thought possible, to help them in their next stage together with Mr. Storer as they move on to further education and to careers that they have chosen for themselves. I think two people who have been day and night working to try and give the very best possible service to you all. And I know that Mr. Polycarp Wakesa has been dealing with a lot of different students who have queries, and every single student has a different profile, and so will have to be dealt with individually. Mr. Wakesa, would you like to just update on where we are with the students and them coming back into Eswatini and onto our campus?
Sure. Thank you very much. So may I start with reference to when do we start? So the online orientation will carry on as planned. So we are starting with online orientation. The IB students will by now have received a copy of their orientation program, and the form students you'll be receiving, if not tomorrow, early on Monday. So we are at a stage where we are not able to open as we had anticipated, partly because of the lockdown, both in Eswatini and in South Africa. And there have been a variety of questions around a number of things. One being that is Waterford able to get students from South Africa into Eswatini? So the regulations state that South Africa prohibits transit through the Republic of South Africa by land, and this is until the 15th of February. And so therefore that means that any students wishing to transit through OR Tambo International Airport in South Africa are only permitted to do so via King Mswati International Airport here in Eswatini, and not through any of the land borders with South Africa. Now, for you to do so, obviously you need a valid school permit, student permit rather, and every student should by now have received, with the possible exception of about 10 students. And as was mentioned earlier, the Immigration Department is not processing the study permits until we are able to proceed as a school. So please remember that. And if you have any questions, please get in touch with me and I will point you in the right direction with regard to the student permits. Another question has been that should the Ministry of Education grant the opening of schools permission to carry on, however, restrictions persist and international travel is prohibited, will Waterford continue being closed? I think at the moment, people are able to, when government allows us to go back to school, as a face-to-face school, King Mswati International Airport is operational. And we had also made alternative arrangements through Kenya Airways, and they're on standby. As soon as Eswatini reopens, that we will be able to bring you onto campus onto Eswatini if you had booked onto that flight. And so there was a question about how much time so we will inform you as soon as we get that information. Now, we will confirm the time, how much time we will give you between the announcement and the time we would like you to get onto campus. Obviously, the answer I think will be as soon as you are able to do so. The other question has been, given the decision to open virtually, are there any specific measures that will be put in place for the orientation of students joining the forms, where their peers are already familiar with the WK approach? I think that one has already been answered. There is an orientation process, and students will be given time to acquaint with themselves. But that is, as I said, during orientation. The online learning is going to be confirmed later on. So those are some of the questions that I have had to field. We look forward to the announcement to reopen school, and if we are able to, we will send our buses to Johannesburg and reopen. Finally, students have asked if they can get to campus in the situation where they do not have resources. So students who do not have computers are struggling with internet and they're in Eswatini, please contact me. We will evaluate your request and then we'll get back to you. But we'll try to give support to the extent, the best possible extent that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wakesa. I'd just like to also emphasize what Polycarp has just said. It is the intention of the Ministry of Education and the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini to open schools. That is their intention. When they can do so safely, they will. When we can guarantee to the Ministry of Education and Training that we are in a situation that we can open and that they give authorization for that, we will do so as well. And that is our main focus at the moment, is to show, indicate, and have an inspection on our school so that we are, in their eyes, compliant with the guidelines and the requirements for the safety and health of all the students who could take advantage of face-to-face education. But at the moment, as of today, until the 22nd of January, there will be no online teaching and learning, and there will be no face-to-face education. At the moment, that does not affect us because we are only due to open our education program on the 27th. We will start the orientation program in the same way that we were going to do, online, so that when we have the go-ahead to open online or face-to-face, and it'll probably be online first and then face-to-face, we are ready to go. We are open to all the questions, so keep them coming, but the situation is one that is changing constantly. And our hope is that the Ministry of Health and all the health workers can feel our support of them during this very, very difficult time. And and if any of you are online who are in that situation as critical frontline workers, know that we understand the situation that around the world, but particularly in Eswatini, we find ourselves, and that we will support in any way possible the opening of our school with whatever needs to happen, both in our school and for you all to be able to come back to school, whether online or in person. It may be a phased approach, as Mr. Wekesa says, as borders open, as airports open, but we will do our utmost, and we are working together with the Ministry of Education and the regional educational officer to that extent, to be able to open. And I think that is my one goal at the moment, is to liaise with the ministry and make sure that we are able to open as soon as possible. We have around 380 people online, which is a huge indication of how important this is to you all and to us all. And we will have an update on Monday, because I think that the situation is changing so rapidly that between now and tomorrow, there won't be any newer information that we can give you. But hopefully over the weekend and Monday, we will put together all the information that we have shared with you today in an easy way to access. We'll start updating our question and Q&As and preparing some visual information, but also some written information, which we can update as things go ahead before the 27th. I sincerely hope that we can at least start online learning on the 27th of January, as planned last year. I just open the floor to those on the panel here, if there's anything else that you would like to add to that, to what has been said, or anything I may have forgotten. Mr. King, Mr. Wekesa, anybody else who would like to add anything? So we'll put this all together. And I think I've seen some questions that may have come up during the webinar. And those we'll have a look at after this meeting and see if they have already been answered, or maybe we haven't been clear enough for everybody. But I do want to reiterate what a difficult situation the country is going through at the moment. And we reach out to those who have lost lives here and who are ill, and hope that we will soon be in a different world in the coming months and years ahead. But it's certainly been a huge possibility to learn, and a possibility to reach out to others and know what you have and appreciate what we have at the moment. And we're in a very good situation now, because everybody here that you can see online is healthy and okay. Mr. King, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think I do. I think maybe just to reassure that we're going to try and remain as flexible as we can. So the number of questions that have come in about when we are allowed to go online, how will we communicate? I think we're going to make sure that we communicate. We'll remain flexible for those who still cannot get here with the others. We will look at even our long break at the end of term and keep residences open, so that students who have just arrived a few weeks before are not forced to go home at the end of the term, because we do not want the traveling across borders. Things are changing as we go. We will try and remain as flexible as possible to serve our community in a safe manner. It is also very difficult to answer each and every one of your questions there. Just know that we are committed to looking after ourselves, your children, and our education. This is important, just as important to us as it is to you. And know that our intentions are good and pure in terms of it.
And we will continue to update everyone every week. Even when things are quite stable, we will continue to reach out and communicate to you so that you are, and especially those of you who are not in Eswatini, understand what the situation is. And I thank you very much for being part of our first Indzaba. Indzaba? Yes?
Yes.
I'm learning.
Yes.
And one day we will all meet together. Mr. Wekesa, your hand was up.
Yes. So and this is just something I was thinking ahead, and I've mentioned it to Mr. King before. That will affect. So, hoping and praying that we will be able to open and come back to campus. At the end of term, the rules for travel will still be in place, and people will need negative COVID PCR test results to travel. So I foresee a situation where the last 48 hours where there'll be multiple students wishing to get that test before they travel, and so so keep that in mind when planning for that end of term. It's just a question I've thought about, but that we will need to work around come whether it's midterm break or end of, particularly end of term, when people need to travel home.
One of the questions was, where did we get the information about why we can't go online at the moment before the 22nd of January? And I reiterate, this is before the 22nd of January, and we do not open until after the 22nd of January. And that information has come from our regional educational officer. So it doesn't actually affect us at the moment because we were never going to open online before the 22nd of January. So in answer to the question that where did we get the information from? Yes. But it actually doesn't affect us at this moment in time. Okay, well, thank you very much for being online, and we'll soon be meeting you again, probably online. And I think for those of you who are not in Eswatini, who are not in the region, who are very far away, this will be a good way of keeping in contact with you, and so that you can see our faces and get to know us even in this way. And I will get to know you too. So thanks a lot, and have a lovely Thursday, the 14th afternoon. Goodbye.